All right, I think we're ready to start. My favorite panel of the day, which is the Alibaba friend or foe. This issue, when I suggested this panel about 9 months ago, little did I know that the whole issue of Alibaba would explode as it has in the last couple of weeks, thanks to one of our panelists who so gracefully agreed to join us today. I think to put all of this in context, it's important to remember that the global trade in counterfeit and pirated goods was estimated to be worth $461 billion a year, or about 2.5% of global imports in 2013, with American, Italian, and French brands the hardest hit. So this is 2 years ago, and it continues to get worse. 69% of all retail purchases took place over the internet in China in 2015. We all know that the Alibaba IPO was the biggest IPO in U.S. history. And tell us a little bit about that, Howard. Oh, let me introduce our panelists first. Hello, you don't know them all. Let me start with you, Howard, and each of the panelists is going to introduce themselves, and you'll see how they kind of fit into this picture and why this is the perfect panel in the world right now to talk about Alibaba. Howard.
Good morning. My name is Howard Hogan. I'm with the law firm Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. The reason I'm on the panel is that I represent the Kering family of brands in a lawsuit that we're bringing against Alibaba in the United States, in New York, in federal court right now over Alibaba's knowing contributions to counterfeiting. And we can get into a little more of the details, but we have taken the lessons of past lawsuits against those who materially contribute to counterfeiting and have applied it to Alibaba. We think we have a winner of a lawsuit, but as we'll discuss today, Alibaba is an important part of the business ecosystem and will be regardless of the lawsuit, and we are very interested in developing principles that will help guide not just Alibaba, but the entire online retail industry.
And I would highly recommend that you read the complaint, the Kering complaint. It's about this thick, filled with juicy details. Okay, Steve?
Hi, good morning. Steve Lamar. I'm with the American Apparel and Footwear Association. We're a trade association based in Washington, D.C., represent about 350 apparel, footwear, travel goods, fashion companies, representing about 1,000 brands, primarily American brands. And our brands are very high fashion brands, low-end brands, sort of everyone in between. The reason I'm on the panel is we've got a very active intellectual property rights practice and have been very, very active. In particular, pointing out our concerns and the deficiencies that we find with Alibaba and what they're doing about trying to prevent or not trying to prevent counterfeits on their marketplace.
Lee?
I'm Lee Sporn. I'm the general counsel at Michael Kors. I've been there for 13 years. The day I started, we had one small store on the Upper East Side of Manhattan and 40 employees and no counterfeiting problem at all. I'm on the panel because everything about the company has grown, and over the last 4 or 5 years, the counterfeiting problem globally for us has grown tremendously. Alibaba is a very substantial part of that problem.
And how many stores and employees do you have now?
Over 600 stores and about 14,000 employees.
Okay, so why do we care about Alibaba? Alibaba is an enormous online market. Its two main platforms that involve our world are Taobao and Tmall. Taobao is the absolute nightmare. Howard?
Sure. So Alibaba is a cluster of related websites, as Barbara said. Alibaba is the business-to-business website. So if you want to sell mass quantities of something and find a customer, or if you're looking for suppliers, that is the sort of website you go to. The problem with Alibaba has been predominantly that you find companies that are brazenly selling materials for counterfeits. So a number of the instances of counterfeiting detailed in our complaint are factories in China who are openly saying, We are selling fake leather for Gucci handbags. It could not be more obvious than that. A lot of the issue in these cases is, does Alibaba have knowledge that it is helping counterfeiters? Well, we would submit, and we think a New York jury will believe, that somebody selling fake leather or leather for Gucci handbags is selling a counterfeit. We also, on the Alibaba site, you have a number of people who are offering to sell watches, perfume, handbags, you name it, not only at substantially lower prices than you would find at retail, but minimum orders of 500, up to 200,000 a month. Again, we're not talking about eBay where grandma is selling her old handbag and reselling it under the first sale doctrine. We're talking about mass quantities of counterfeiting. And Alibaba is in English, so it is a global website. Taobao is more of an equivalent to eBay, where it's consumer to consumer, people selling their own goods. What we believe is that a lot of these consumers who are selling through Taobao are actually organized counterfeiters. But you will see much smaller lot sizes on Taobao, and Taobao is in Chinese. Interestingly enough, Taobao is widely used around the world, not just in China. I think the last time I checked, it is the 200 and something most popular website in the United States, probably owing to the number of native Chinese speakers in the United States. Then there is AliExpress, which is sort of a hybrid model, and Alipay, which is their version of PayPal, who processes credit card orders for a lot of these goods.
Steve, tell us how Alibaba came to the attention to the AAFA, and also a little bit about your relationship with the U.S. Trade Association.
So we've been working with Alibaba for about 3.5, 4 years to try and resolve our concerns. And admittedly, they were very active in participating in these conversations. But after this period of time, we felt we were getting nowhere. And so we raised our concerns directly with a number of U.S. government agencies, the U.S. Trade Representative, which is the part of the U.S. government that negotiates trade agreements. And they're also tasked with our Congress with reviewing intellectual property rights practices by foreign governments and also by online marketplaces around the world. And we also raised this with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which is the agency that regulates our stock exchange. And so as Alibaba was going public, we thought it was a good opportunity for them to understand what the status of concerns were by U.S. companies on the state of intellectual property rights on their website as they were in effect offering themselves to the U.S. public. We followed that up in July with a letter to Jack Ma directly, where we laid out 4 points about how we thought the platforms should be improved so we could effect permanent takedowns, we could prevent counterfeits from going up into the website directly, we could make sure there was transparency so everybody would know what would happen. And we actually thought this was something that they would welcome, because even Jack Ma had described a number of times, counterfeits as a cancer, we want to fix it and so forth. So we felt, hey, we're speaking your language. You've said you want to fix this, we agree. These are some common sense ideas to fix it. Then followed that up in October with official comments to our U.S. government, to the U.S. Trade Representative, which compiles an annual report on what they call, it's called the Notorious Markets Report, where they summarize whether there's, what is the status of different marketplaces around the world, both physical and online marketplaces.
By the way, a lot of the comments, which feed into the Special 301, are submitted by brand owners like you. I mean, no matter how small your brand is, if you're having problems, it's a great way to be involved.
And it is an opportunity. It's really open to the world to comment, and the U.S. government receives comments from not just U.S. stakeholders, but stakeholders from all over the world. And in this process, they actually get rebuttal comments. So it's an opportunity for the markets that have been nominated for inclusion in this Notorious Markets Report to then themselves post comments to rebut why they don't think they should be included. And what was interesting in this case was this was the first time that a nominated market rebutted the concerns that we had posted. So we expressed concerns about Alibaba, and they posted a concern back. And this, by the way, is the only comment. They haven't responded to any of our requests for meetings in the 10 months since we've been requesting to have this productive dialogue, except to say that we're trying to change their fundamental business model. And our response was, well, if your fundamental business model is theft of our members' brands, then yes, we're trying to change your fundamental business model. And that's been the request. Oh, and then the final point I'll say is, in December, the US government published their report, very extensive comments in the Notorious Markets report about Alibaba, in effect agreeing with our concerns, saying that the processes that Alibaba had in place were too slow, they were difficult to use, they were lacking transparency, and they tasked Alibaba with fixing this problem immediately. It's been 5 months, and we've not seen any action to fix these problems, so I think that speaks volumes.
So with this context, Lee and I both received an email along with several other members. I'm actually not a member of the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition, which is another, but I was. It's the trade organization which is charged, many of you probably go to their meetings, with one issue, which is counterfeiting, dealing with the counterfeiting problem. Members consist of most of the major fashion companies and also companies, pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and Underwriters Lab and General Motors, and a kind of cross-section of companies which have problems with the sale of counterfeit goods. So Lee and I have both been longtime board members of the IACC, and we're both at one time chairman of the board of the IACC, chairperson of the board of the IACC. And so we got an email, I'm still on their mailing list, which basically announced with a hip hip hooray that Jack Ma of Alibaba Group confirmed as keynote speaker to the IACC spring meeting, which is actually this week. I sent an email to Lee, which I will read to you. Is it my imagination, or is inviting Jack Ma to speak at the IACC meeting inviting the fox into the chicken house? And Lee wrote, I agree, it gives him cover. And Lee, why don't you tell us what happened after that?
So I should say, I don't think there's anything at all wrong about having Jack Ma speak at an IACC conference. I think a constructive dialogue, if it's possible, that's a perfectly good place for it to happen. My objection was really a little bit more focused on two things. One, that a special category of admission had been made so that Alibaba could, and in fact did, become a member of the IACC. But more important to me was the fact that the president of the IACC, in connection with announcing that, was publicly extolling Jack Ma's personal commitment and Alibaba's commitment to combating counterfeiting, a commitment about which I am highly skeptical. And the difficulty is, if one is pursuing a litigation strategy like the Kering strategy, the intention of Alibaba and its management is a critical fact in the case. Are they really genuinely making an effort, or are they not genuinely making an effort? And reasonable people can disagree. But when the trade association for which we are paying dues publicly undermines our ability to submit proof that that commitment is insincere, that for me was a real problem, and I got a little irritated.
And what did you do when you got a little irritated?
I sent a little love note.
And what did...
I sent a letter to the IACC explaining, I thought in great detail, why I thought it was a mistake to admit Alibaba as a member and to publicly embrace Alibaba as an entity that was committed to fighting counterfeiting, because I saw no evidence of it, and I've never spoken to another brand owner who believed it. So it seemed like a very strange thing for our trade association to be publicly saying. I withdrew from the organization, and I told them that nobody on my team was going to be permitted to engage in any activities with the IACC until the problem was rectified, which it was.
And did you get any support in response to your letter?
So I did from many brand owners, and one or two similarly withdrew from the IACC over the coming weeks, including Kering.
And Tiffany.
And Tiffany. And the response I got from the ICC was essentially, you're really old, and you're kind of irrelevant, and this is the future. Get with it, or get out. And by the way, here's a full refund of your membership dues, which I appreciated because, you know, it's a budget. So.
We were both really, really hurt because I kind of felt the I'm really old sting too, as a former chair. And I had actually, at the same day that I had written Lee an email about how do we feel about this, I wrote an email to the to the chairman of the board who succeeded us, who's actually been chairman for many, many years, and said, what's up? I mean, why, I have no voice, I have no standing to have an opinion, but I do have an opinion, and many of us worked very hard to build this organization into what it is today, and why would you invite the villain to join? And she never responded. She called me after the press, after several big articles came out. The AP did an article, and the Wall Street Journal, and Forbes, and then she finally called and asked for my opinion, but
Just to clarify, the press that picked up the story described my letter as an expression of deep loathing for Alibaba. Nothing could be further from the truth, and it's not a very constructive way to think about this. Alibaba is a series of platforms that have provided incredible access to a really important global market that many companies, including in the luxury sector, take advantage of in a lot of different ways. I have no loathing for it. I have a tremendous amount of respect for it. But certainly Michael Kors and many others have a very narrow focus. It's a vicarious liability for the counterfeiting activities of others on the platforms that they maintain. So the issue is really very narrow. And again, I think it doesn't help anybody to characterize what's going on as hating Alibaba. Very useful tool, definitely needs some work in the vicarious liability area.
Yeah, I would just add to that, there's an important context here, which is, all brands need outlets, retail outlets, to sell products, to get products in the hands of consumers. And no brand wants to stop means of communicating with consumers and allowing consumers to get their products. The problem here is Alibaba has chosen to choose a different path than many of the other internet service providers. And this is an important part of the context. Tiffany certainly had its battles with eBay, and people have different opinions about it, but there's no doubt that eBay is taking common sense steps to damp down the amount of counterfeits that are sold on there.
But as the old people in the room, Barbara and I will tell you that that's not the way eBay began.
No.
Alibaba today looks very much the way eBay did at its inception. There was no effort to combat counterfeiting, and as the brand owners originally met with eBay, their response sounded exactly like Jack Ma's response sounds today. This is not our responsibility. This is your problem. We're not getting involved.
We're just a platform. It's your problem. We can't help you brand owners identify counterfeits. We will provide you a tool, and they provided, of course, the Vero tool.
And it took a very long, concerted, collaborative effort among the brand owners that included litigation to bring the sort of pressure to bear on eBay that got it to where it is today, which I think most of us would agree is a reasonable place for them to be. We're now at that stage with Alibaba where what needs to happen is the maximum amount of pressure needs to be applied to have them address this in a way that looks more like the way eBay looks, so they can get a result that looks more like what eBay looks like. And the issue with the ICC is that it is supposed to be the trade association that is consistently applying that pressure, not giving warm hugs and sloppy kisses.
And if you read the AP story, you will learn that the president of the ICC owns stock in Alibaba, number one, and number two, that Alibaba recently hired somebody who was at one time one of us as its top enforcement guy. Now, I'm sure they're paying him a lot of money, but frankly, I wouldn't do it for any amount of money. But hey, I'm old. I still have ethics, and I want to die that way. But just to give you a little more context on the eBay situation, Lee is absolutely right. Lee and I were both chair during the eBay era, and we didn't even consider inviting eBay to join the IACC. In fact, I remember some very heated discussions when some members wanted to invite them to attend the meeting. We ended up having, as we said, discussions with them. In the midst of all of that, eBay was sued by Tiffany. We all kind of assumed, and you disagree with me if you will, Lee, that eBay would win, that Tiffany would lose the lawsuit, but we were glad that they did it, that somebody stepped up and sued eBay. In the course of that litigation, which was over a period of years, eBay reached out to all of us to try to get us on board, and but in a much more kind of helpful way. How can we make the Vero tool, which is the notice and takedown tool on eBay, more helpful to you as a brand? I mean, I had many meetings with them, and I worked for relatively small brands. They also just another context here. The eBay Tiffany lawsuit took place basically during the biggest economic downturn in the U.S. since, the Depression, 2008, 2009. And having clerked for a federal judge, I always wondered, what could the judge possibly do in terms of a decision that would, would remedy this nightmare? And the judge probably couldn't have done much more than he did. It was a time when people were selling their grandmother's clothes out of the garage, and that was the vehicle to do it. How is this different than today with Alibaba and the Kering Group, Howard?
Certainly. So that eBay lawsuit led to what is now the dominant sort of decision in setting up the standard for establishing contributory liability for counterfeiting and trademark infringement. And it all stems from actually a 70s case, the Inwood case, which is about product supply. And the Supreme Court of the United States said that a third party can be held contributorily liable, joint and severally liable, just as guilty as the counterfeiter themselves if they provide the marketplace for the counterfeiting and if they have knowledge of the counterfeiting. And so Tiffany certainly established that eBay provided the marketplace. And where Judge Sullivan found there was no liability was on the knowledge prong. He found that generally knowing that there is counterfeits being sold in your marketplace is not enough to establish contributory liability. So our lawsuit is very, very pointed. We initially brought the lawsuit in the summer of 2014, and we named 15 specific counterfeiting rings that were operating on Alibaba's system. They're called the merchant defendants. And they were all specifically, there was probably at the time 100,000, 200,000 merchants we could have chosen from. We chose 15 that we think any dummy could have told were selling counterfeits, either because we told them they're selling counterfeits and they still wouldn't take them down, or because it was obvious on its face, for some of the reasons I discussed earlier, that these were all counterfeits. And so we think we can establish this specific level of knowledge. But that's not the end of the story. After we initially brought the lawsuit, Kering wanted to work with Alibaba in good faith and take them up on their offer. And we spent a year working with them to see if we could find a non-litigation solution. In that time, the number of counterfeits being offered on Alibaba's websites went up, not down. And so we brought a second complaint, which named an additional 16 merchant defendant groups, many of whom we had specifically complained about during the course of that year. And so we believe we can establish both prongs in a way that was not teed up in the Tiffany versus eBay case.
Steve, you've had sort of the same experience at AAFA. You told me recently that you've been trying to meet with them forever. You recently were pushed off to, is it their new lobbyist? Tell us a little bit about your organization's history of trying to work with Alibaba on behalf of your members. And by the way, remember, because we're talking about IACC also, and the trade organizations are about your members, and you can start by talking about how you see your role.
Well, what we do is we go back to our members on a regular, on an iterative basis, constantly asking for feedback. And the one thing that we hear pretty overwhelmingly is that While Alibaba has been creating a variety of different systems, those systems don't work. They're difficult to use, they're cumbersome. Establishing your identity to register to be on the system can be very difficult. Once you get on, it's very difficult to actually execute takedowns. Assuming your takedowns get executed, they pop right back up again. I often hear the statistics where somebody will say, the good news is we had 5,000 takedowns last month. The bad news is 6,000 new markets just popped right back up. So it is very much of a whack-a-mole problem. We're not at a place where we can get permanent takedowns and actually prevent the infringing sites from coming up in the first place. And I think this gets to Lee's point, is that there's no real demonstration of commitment on their part. We very much value the opportunities that these markets create for our members, because there's a number of marketplaces that are out there, and our members very much want to sell to the Chinese consumer, and they want to participate in online spaces. That's the future of the industry. But you don't see that level of commitment occurring here to really make it happen. We've spent a lot of time with Alibaba, and we just keep spinning the wheels. They're not coming forward with the kind of programs that we think really need to occur like this.
So there is a recent development that may be good news. The ICC had developed its own negotiated resolution with Alibaba called the Market Safe program, which is more Vero-like in the way it operates. One of the difficulties with it is that it was only open to ICC members, and those ICC members, in addition to paying their dues, then paid thousands of additional dollars to participate in the Market Safe program to accomplish takedowns with Alibaba.
So you're basically paying more money to accomplish what should be accomplished for free.
Correct. And for many of us, that felt like evidence of a lack of commitment on Alibaba's part. Why were they only doing what could arguably be more effective takedowns for this select group of brand owners that were paying dearly to participate? So over the last few days, in addition to Alibaba's membership category being eliminated in the ICC, it was announced, I want to say last Thursday or Friday, that the Market Safe program was going to be open to all brand members, irrespective of their membership in the ICC, and there would be no charge for participating in it. To the extent that program ultimately becomes a good program, that's a very good development for brand owners. I don't know what Howard's reaction is to it, though.
I think it's obviously a positive development, and we're looking for different mechanisms to get at this problem from different ways. But fundamentally, you can design algorithms that will eliminate the problem before they ever get to the website, so somebody has to complain and file a takedown notice. And many of the ISPs in this space do the same thing. In fact, it's not even a West versus China thing, because Alibaba's main competitor in China, JD.com, is a lot cleaner. And I noticed that whenever Jack Ma does a speech on counterfeiting, he says, go look at JD.com. And JD.com is quoted as saying things like, we all know who the problem is and it ain't us. There are a number of other things that they could be doing. In their securities filings for their IPO, Alibaba touted their deep learning, their ability to know their customers and to know their merchants and to marry the two up. And indeed, one of my colleagues signed up as an Alibaba merchant so she could see what the process was and we could describe it accurately. And I got to say, to this day, she still gets a weekly email from Alibaba encouraging her to find ways to sell counterfeits more efficiently. And I got to say, it's not a great litigation strategy. I mean, we like it, but...
The fact of the matter is that where you have a vendor offering to sell 20,000 units of Prada bags for $20 a unit every month, it doesn't take technology to figure out that that's counterfeit merchandise. It's easy. And we have examples of companies, platforms, that have done a reasonably efficient job of preventing the sale of counterfeit merchandise. It's simply not credible that Alibaba couldn't do it if it wanted to do it. It's that consistent application of pressure, which was necessary with eBay, that we hope eventually will get them there, but that pressure seems to require litigation as part of the strategy.
Steve, it was mentioned to us before today that AAFA was in favor of Alibaba joining the IECC.
We don't take a position about membership in other organizations.
Would you have let Alibaba join the AAFA?
No. We take a position in membership in our organization.
It's interesting. One of the questions that kept coming up is, why is it different for Alibaba to be a member of the ICC than it is for them to be a member of INTA, which it has been for a while? To me, it's black and white. INTA has never had any criteria for membership. If you pay your dues, you're in. You're a brand owner, you're a law firm, you're a counterfeiter. And by the way, Alibaba is a brand. It makes perfect sense to me that they should be a member of INTA. It's an important global brand. That's very different from a focused trade association whose members are affirmatively strategizing together to have an impact on Alibaba. Very different.
Very different. Why do you think the board of the ISCC approved Alibaba joining?
I'm going to express no opinion on that subject.
Howard?
Don't look at me on that one.
I know. I mean, I'd say they're lemmings, or there's another story that we heard was that they were sent an email saying, we're going to create this new membership. If you do not object within 48 hours, then we will assume that you've accepted them as members. But no one's talking, so your guess is as good as ours. Howard, do you think that this last week of the IACC drama will perhaps lead to a settlement of your lawsuit?
Well, I don't know. I will say that today in New York, my partner on the case will be appearing in federal court on a status conference in front of the judge. And that may make headlines, I don't know. And we'll see where it goes from there. We had engaged in a more recent round of attempts to try to mediate this, and Alibaba withdrew precipitously, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, saying that the mediation process had run its course. That's a matter of public record, and that's we'll know more after today's conference.
So there hasn't been a mediation or a sit-down with them, a settlement conference?
There has not been a settlement conference with the judge. There was court-ordered mediation. The judge asked us to mediate with them specifically, and we started to engage in the process of hiring a professional mediator to help us work through these issues when the Forbes article on Alibaba came out titled Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, in which Jack Ma is quoted as saying, "I will never settle this case. It would be an insult to my honor to settle the case." So we wrote to the judge and said, "Judge, this doesn't seem like an auspicious start to mediation." And his terse response was, "I'm glad the lawyers in this case are not in charge of international relations. Go mediate." And so we did.
By the way, who's representing Alibaba in the U.S.?
Alibaba is represented by Bruce Rich and his team at Weil Gotshal, who represented eBay in the Tiffany versus eBay
That's
case.
Interesting. So tell us briefly, what are the claims in the carrying complaint?
So the main set of claims are the contributory infringement, contributory counterfeiting claims that I described earlier. Alibaba has not moved to dismiss those claims, so those claims are going to go forward regardless. We also have a direct a direct infringement claim against them over their sales of our marks as keywords in generating the responses to figure out which merchants are going to be displayed more prominently on Taobao and some of the other websites. And we've also brought a more creative kind of claim under the Racketeering Influenced Corrupt Organizations Act. It's a RICO statute in the United States, was brought to help fight organized crime, but it has a civil component for enterprises that are engaged in criminal activity. And the statute lists a number of predicate offenses, and lo and behold, counterfeiting is one. So we have brought this as an additional tool. Alibaba did move to dismiss that claim, and that motion is pending. But regardless of what happens on the RICO claim, and we think we had a good RICO claim, those trademark claims are going to go forward.
Can you imagine any, how would you settle this case? I mean, what would you take? And I know,
I'm not sure I can comment on that in a public forum, Barbara.
would you settle this case? Do you think Kering would settle this case?
Kering has shown every interest and has gone to the ends, literally the ends of the earth. I mean, we've talked in Hong Kong, we've talked in Paris, we've talked in New York to try to settle this case. But I think what we are hearing, and I can't go into the contents of those communications because mediation is subject to a confidentiality commitment, but I think what we're hearing is what Alibaba is telling every other brand owner, which is, it's your problem, you have to deal with it.
Yeah. Steve, can you add to that in terms of what would make AAFA happy in terms of Alibaba's change in behavior?
Well, we've been pretty consistent that there needs to be a process that they put in place, they fund. You know, we believe this very much to be a problem that they've created, so they need to solve it, that prevents counterfeits from going on the site, and the ones that are on there can be permanently removed. And we also believe it should be done there should be a transparent, verifiable manner. One of the things that we've experienced is, as we've been talking to various groups and organizations, and they've all shared this with us too, and some of them who have done this, is that a lot of these programs are shielded behind confidentiality agreements, so you can't really tell what's happening. And so you'll see these claims, as I mentioned before, where various programs have resulted in a number of takedowns, but if you're able to probe behind it, you find that those offending sites, those infringers, are easily replaced by others. So, you know, we'd like to see some data that shows that we're actually having some success here.
Who have you met with from Alibaba in general? What sort of classification of employee?
Well, nobody recently. When we were talking a year ago and before, it was mostly officials out of Hong Kong. It was their business units, the security units, so the people that we felt were entrusted with the ability to create the kind of programs that we were looking for.
Mm-hmm. Lee, will Michael Kors rejoin the IACC after this situation?
I don't know.
Not your problem, right? Anything else we need to think about with respect to Alibaba? Are there other Alibabas out there that we should be worried about as brand owners?
Certainly, we haven't seen anything of that size and scope. So, I mean, there's counterfeiting on Etsy, but who cares?
Yeah.
I didn't say that, did I? But it's, you know, it's one pot holder. It's one toilet paper holder. It's not going to change our business at all.
Has eBay changed its tune significantly since the Tiffany lawsuit?
Yeah, it's night and day. I think most brand owners would tell you it's a completely different experience today. They have worked very hard to create algorithms that reduce the amount of counterfeit merchandise that's ever offered, and they have a very effective, I would say, very prompt takedown ability. So it's in general, I think, a reasonable collaboration. Now, there are people who will say that the result in Tiffany versus eBay is just the wrong result, and an effective takedown system shouldn't have been enough. There's no point arguing it, at least in the United States, anymore. But given what the legal obligation is, I think eBay executes it as well as one can expect them to execute it.
And eBay, despite my nasty comment about Alibaba hiring, you know, somebody from the light side, you know, to the dark side, eBay did the same thing. I mean, do you remember when they hired Jay Monahan from Disney? I mean, they hired some very good in-house IP lawyers with deep experience in IP, but again, they didn't force. They seemed to be interested in having a conversation, and they didn't force themselves in the way that Alibaba has through expensive lobbyists and the like. Howard, go ahead.
The one thing I was going to add is we're all going to be anxiously watching to hear what comes out of Alibaba from Jack Ma's speech at IACC this week. There have been little dribbles through the news of things they are prepared to do. We remain skeptical, but we have an open mind.
And we were told, some people are talking about walking out of the room when he speaks. I wonder if he'll even show up. That'll be interesting. Any thoughts on that?
Well, just one thing I would add is that, we've been focusing a lot on Alibaba, and again, the reasons really to think about is not only are they a huge source of counterfeits, but they are themselves just a huge marketplace in general. I mean, they're the largest retailer. The number of registered users of the Alibaba sites is, I think, close to 400 million now. I mean, it is just skyrocketing. And so we view that not only as a challenge just from the sheer scope of the market and the sheer scope of the problem that's on that market, but because it's a technology platform, and again, this cues up to the comments that Howard made about their ability to fix this themselves with these algorithms, is that this becomes an export platform, a proliferator of counterfeits worldwide. You see this is a very popular market all over the world. You mentioned DHgate, I think. Lee, you'd mentioned DHgate before. Just by comparison, so we've been very vocal and very public about our conversation with Alibaba. We've not heard from them in this last year. We also, in our comments to the USTR, and by the way, I would encourage each and every one of you to pay attention to this comment opportunity, which will emerge again later on in the year. You can go to ustr.gov and you can find the Notorious Markets Report, and there will be an opportunity for anybody to comment. But we identified a number of other marketplaces, including DHgate, as one where we are experiencing problems. They've been very active in reaching back out to us. In fact, I'm meeting with them on Friday because they want to talk about what they're doing and why they don't think we should nominate them again this coming year. So right there, just from that little episode, is a comparison between a level of dialogue that we're just simply not seeing with Alibaba.
Who is the next Alibaba?
I think if we could predict that, we might not be on this stage. We might be on an island somewhere.
Exactly. Anything else to wrap up? Howard? You want to talk about your book?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Barbara has the first and the really trailblazing book in the fashion and law and business world, but I also have a book with my partner Lois Herzika. It's available from the Practicing Law Institute, and I think it's a great summary of a lot of these kinds of issues and a lot more.
And Baker McKenzie has a wonderful book, and also we have an international book that is for sale or for giveaway outside. So thank you very much. This is going to be really the hot issue to watch going forward. It's, we'll see, the IACC meeting is this week in DC. We've got the Kering lawsuit, which is coming. By the way, have you scheduled Jack Ma's deposition?
No, but we'll have a better sense of when that may occur after today.
Exactly. Thank you.